start before the beginning of time. With no point of reference, you spoke to the dark and flushed out the wonder of the light. And as you speak, 100 billion galaxies are born. In the vapor of your breath, the planets form. If the stars were made to worship, so will I. I can see your heart in everything you made. Every burning star, a signal fire of grace. If creation sings your praises, so will I. All right. Lord, we love to sing your praise. Lift up your name. Come on, every voice. Help me sing. God of your promise, you don't speak in vain, no syllable empty or void. And for once you have spoken, all nature and science follow the sound of your voice. Oh, and as you speak, 100 billion creatures catch your breath. They're evolving in pursuit of what you said. If it all reveals your nature, so will I. Oh, I can see your heart in everything you say. Every painted sky, a canvas of your grace. If creation still obeys you, so will I. Amen. We lift you up. So will I. Come on, let's declare this. If the stars were made to worship, so will I. If the mountains bow in reverence, so will I. If the oceans roar your greatness, so will I. For if everything exists to lift you high, so will I. Oh, if the wind goes where you send it, so will I. Oh, if the rocks cry out in silence, so will I. Oh, if the sun with all our praises still falls short, then we'll sing again 100 billion times. God of salvation, you chased down my heart through all of my failure and pride. On a hill you created, light of the world, abandoned in darkness to die. But as you speak, come on, 100 billion failures that disappear. Oh, where you lost your life so I could find it here. If you left the grave behind you would again 100 billion times. But one measure could amount to your desire. You're the one who never leaves the one behind. Come on, let's give him praise. Come on, let's lift up his name.
Hey guys, Michael J. Crawford, the Anti-Trucker here, and good morning. You know, here, just a funny thought that I was just thinking about while that was playing. You guys, for those of you that have been joining me on Sunday mornings for a while, you know that is my absolute favorite church song. That's performed by that's Kyle that's singing that, and the worship team from the church that I actually attend. And the ironic thing is that every single Sunday morning live stream I get zero ad revenue, because Hillsong Church, which is the church that originally wrote that song, files a copyright strike against every single one of my Sunday morning live streams. So I'm going to have to find a different song to use, but man, which I don't want to, because I love that song. But that's the world we live in today. So Mountains Elysium is first in the house. Good to see you. Darth Revan second. And then Mountains Elysium ruins the day by saying Hail Karoga. Darth Revan says best place to come in is second. Then Mountains Elysium says Hail Karoga again. And then Trustin says good morning, Mountains Elysium. Then says free Auntie, because boy, Mountains Elysium is just being a jerk today. Aravac Saunders says greetings. Bird O'Prey says every bird. No idea what you're talking about. And then says Kapla. And then he says, did he say hola? If you're talking about Kyle, I don't think that's in the lyrics anywhere. Sean says Jolan True. Mountains Elysium says Aaron Go Bray. Okay. Dart says, Mountains Elysium, hey bud, when are we getting phase speed up? I hear more. Will DM you. Hope you guys are safe. Okay, not sure what you're talking about there. Bird wants to know, does he know Ector is listening? Wow, so Bird is just like in rare form today. Darth Revens is still talking about Mountains Elysium. Commander Shran says hello. Let's see. Indy Tiger says hi. Rambling Rattlesnake says hi. Average Am wants to know, is it sinful to rob a stagecoach on the Lord's Day? Hashtag playing Red Dead Redemption. Well, in real life, it absolutely is a sin to rob a stagecoach pretty much any day. As far as if you're playing Red Dead Redemption, depends on where your heart's at, my friend. Fandom Menace says, I have heard that that either China has invaded India or that they've gotten into another border conflict, but I can't figure out which it is. Also, what did you think about the SpaceX launch? I enjoyed the SpaceX launch. I actually recorded it on when it happened live. I was going to do a little bit of, I'm going to use the footage for something coming up down the pipe a little bit, but I enjoyed it. I did not see, I assume they're at the ISS by now, so I didn't see the docking or anything like that, but assuming that they broadcast that as well. But I did watch the launch live, and it was wonderful to see. They're not protesters, they're rioters, and they're breaking federal law. Well, MLP, that's the problem. There are protesters, and there are rioters. And the hardest part of all this is to differentiate between the two. And that's a serious problem right now for law enforcement, because how do you tell the difference, and what is the proper response? So we'll get into that in just a couple of minutes here. Darth Revan says, wait, you're not the anti-trucker? No, I am not. Phantom Menace says, what do you think is next for SpaceX after this successful launch, like next year? I don't know. I don't know what their plans are. I know that eventually they want to, basically sell tickets to go on space tours and stuff like that. And I know that if I am rich by that point, I'm going to buy Darren Wagner a ticket. But I think ultimately what Elon Musk is up to is he wants to build a industrial facility on the moon so that he can corner the market in H3. That's my thought. And MLP then says these people are not protesters. They are rioting and deserve to be arrested. Some of them you are absolutely correct. Some of them you are absolutely incorrect. That's my point. Somebody disliked this. Well, you know what? Here's the problem is that sometimes people will dislike something simply because it has religious connotation. Like obviously, my Sunday morning live streams, we talk about religion most of the time. And I talk about it in a very frank and forthcoming manner, and I don't hide the fact that I believe in God. That being said, there are some people that find that offensive. And some people will even consider it hate speech. I mean, I have been flagged on some of these videos. Fortunately, YouTube has said flags down, but I have been flagged on some of these videos as being hate speech. And just because I have the nerve to believe in something that they don't. And that's kind of silly. Darth says, is it wrong to take clothes off a dead body? Wow, that's a interesting question, Darth Revan. I don't know. I guess it would depend on the overall context. Didn't the SpaceX explode? Not that I know of. Aberjam says, my heart belongs to bacon. And if the SpaceX did explode, I'm pretty sure it would have been on the news this morning, but all they were talking about this morning was the destruction from last night. Valor puts $10. Thank you so much, Valor. I truly appreciate it. Move that up there.
Good morning, Auntie Trekker. Just wanted to give you something from Viv, who says hello and she wants the James Bond super chat. I have no idea why. I think she drank a little too much last night.
Okay. Wow, as much as I don't want to play that on a church live stream. All right. So brace your eyes, everybody. If you don't know the James Bond super chat, oh boy. Which number is it? Is it 4?
I may have a It's not clean. Repeat, I do not have a clean Take the bloody
That is just painful. And then Valor put in another $5 so that we can get a palate cleanser there.
In the great hall of the Justice League, there floats the world's 4 greatest turds. Created from cosmic indigestion, Super Turd. Wonder Turd. Fat Turd. Aqua Turd. and those two junior super turds, Lore Reloaded and Punchy the Wonder Cat.
Okay, there we go. Little bit of Sunday morning mayhem there. And so, thank you, Valor, for both of those super chats. I truly do appreciate it. And back to the serious topic of the day. But Darth says, Darren won't believe it. If he went into space, he would believe he was a simulation or some crap. You're probably right. And those, Darren says, I saw some heroic gentlemen rescuing boxes of Reeboks and Nikes from the local stores to ensure they aren't destroyed by arsonists in the name of George Floyd on the news. Yeah. See, and that's a problem. So what's going on is, of course, now, unless you've lived under a rock, you already know what happened to George Floyd. And I'm not going to bother with talking about how horrible that was. If anybody doesn't think that was horrible, you don't belong here. I'm sorry. Regardless of, whether you think George, here's the thing. I understand George Floyd was accused of passing a fake $20 bill. That's my understanding of the crime that he committed. I also understand that he was not resisting arrest as far as from what I could see. He was being relatively passive to the police officers. And so at the very, very minimum, the officer that had his knee on the back of George Floyd's neck was using excessive force. That's bare minimum. Now, the fact that they charge him with third-degree murder, honestly, I'm not really all that upset about. I think that that's an appropriate charge for a situation. I know some people think that it doesn't go far enough, but they don't understand that you don't put charges against people because you're mad at them. You put charges against people that are appropriate to the crime. First-degree murder is premeditated, and it's highly doubtful that you could possibly prove that this police officer showed up with the intent of killing George Floyd. That's kind of silly. But third-degree murder, that's a little more appropriate. Anyway, But then you have the reaction, right? And the reaction from the general population, of course, has been anger and outrage over the misbehavior of these police officers. And that's completely understandable. And in my opinion, in most cases, justified that people would be angry and upset over what happened. However, then you have a small group of people that want to use this situation in order to cause mayhem, right? You have your people that are basically anarchists that just want to watch the world burn, so to speak. You have your people that are opportunists that want to use the situation to get a little bit of looting going on, right? And so, and you have those people that's the real problem. But the question then becomes, how do you differentiate between the two? If you're the police officers of Chicago or San Francisco or Nashville or any of the major cities where this stuff has been going on, how do you differentiate between the protesters that are upset over something that went horribly wrong and the looters / rioters that are the true criminal element? And the problem is that, well, the only way you can tell the difference is when they actually commit an act of violence. Then you have just cause to arrest those individuals. However, when they're within a sea of people, it's very hard to pick out just that person. And so that's why you run into these problems where you have the police have to fire tear gas into the crowd and stuff like that to disperse the crowd because of a few people in that crowd that are committing acts of violence. And if you watch some of the footage, you'll see exactly what I'm talking about, because you'll see a crowd of several hundred people and there's like 5 people in the crowd that are throwing objects at the police. Right? The rest of the people are there because they're angry over what happened to George. Those 5 people are trying to cause trouble. And then you have people that then start saying, well, but the police are being brutal because these people were just trying to protest, and all of a sudden they start shooting tear gas because they weren't the ones throwing, bottles or rocks or whatever at the police. And it just becomes a no-win situation. So, the reason for the name of this live stream is so the question then becomes, what would Jesus do, right? What do you do in a circumstance like this? How do you properly deal with this? Well, first and foremost, given the circumstances, you do not go march in the streets. All right, that's all you're doing by marching in the streets is giving shelter to those that are committing crimes. And you may have the best of intentions, but I'm sorry, if you are the one marching in the streets with genuine, moral outrage over what happened to George, I understand why you want to be there. But in doing so, you are effectively giving cover to all the people out there that are trying to commit crimes and take advantage of the situation. So first and foremost, you do not march. Second of all, you do not, you don't try to retaliate, obviously, right? If there was a police officer that commits a horrible act against someone, you do not commit a horrible act against a police officer to get revenge. The problem is that no matter how much, how many rocks you throw at the cops, none of that's going to bring George back. Right? No matter how many TVs or DVD players you steal from the local store, it's not going to bring George back. And so we need to, basically, we need to keep calm, and we need to stay home at this point. And I hope that it'll take time. Cooler heads will prevail eventually. The riots will, go down. And the ironic thing is that you have a lot of these riots are hurting the very people that supposedly this outrage is to defend. They were showing on the local San Francisco news the other day. There's a marijuana dispensary in downtown San Francisco owned by a black guy, and he put up a big sign in the window saying black-owned business in the hopes that that means the rioters wouldn't attack. But come on, he's got a marijuana dispensary. Do you really think that business lasted long? So the rioters don't care about the cause, and so if you are marching, you're giving them cover, and you're basically defaming the name of George Floyd. So that's all. Bird of Prey says, I'm pretty sure Kyle said every bird. I'm pretty sure he didn't. Phantom Menace says, in order to see stuff in space, don't they need to have infrastructure to actually see? Because as far as I know, there's nothing really to see, or am I wrong? In order to see stuff in space, don't they need to have infrastructure to actually see? I'm not sure what you mean. To see stuff? Well, if you have something in space and light reflects off of it, then you can see it. I have no idea what you're talking about there. Indy Tiger says, NASA asked the public for help designing an obstacle avoidance sensor for Venus. I submitted my design on Friday. Oh, very good. You know what you should, it's very simple actually. You just construct a system of remote piloted vehicles that Bird of Prey 5 pilots, and then you have your space probe take whatever path Bird of Prey 5 doesn't. That's your collision avoidance system. SpaceX rocket tested in Texas did explode on Friday. It's the fourth time they lost this next generation rocket they were testing. Gotcha. I did not know that. And MLP OMG, take the bloody okay, yeah, that's the James Bond super chat. Laura's the hairiest Bond girl I know. Are you sure about that? Well, yeah, I'm pretty sure. Dar the Reverend says, oh, last week I had a freaking drama in my neighborhood. My neighbor reported me to the dog warden for recording dog fighting when it was clearly them playing loudly. Well, yeah. So then, first of all, wow, I didn't know there was such a thing as a dog warden, but I guess that's Ireland for you.
Hello,
and Birdo Prey 5 donated $1. And says, it's Jeff Franklin's choice. It is his birthday. I did not know it was your birthday, Jeff. Happy birthday, my friend. Happy birthday, Jeff. from the bottom of my heart. So you get to pick any of the super chats. You throw it at me, Jeff. Make sure you put at Anti-Trekker in there so that I see it, and I will play it, my friend. Seeing Lord like this, I gone blind. Sorry, my friend. Meant to say wash. The super chat hurt my brain. Darren says fake X yawn. What they presented was just misdirected as anything NASA was just as misdirected as anything NASA put out. Lots of people are waking up to those shenanigans. I don't think that there's lots of people that are waking up to those shenanigans, Darren. I genuinely don't. But I understand you have your position that you hold, but I don't see a huge swell of flat Earth revivalism. And Jeff wants death to disco. You got it, my friend.
I donated $5 the first time. He gets super chats too.
There it is, the day disco died. And of course, yes, Jeff, if you want, you can have an Uber chat as well. So, let me know in the chat. You can have another one. If you don't want an Uber chat, that's okay. But you certainly have the right to one, because it's true. Bert did put a $5 in there. All right. Aberjam says, I may need to have a cold shower after that lore super chat. Really? You need a cold shower? Why? Because you're all worked up and hot and bothered over that? That's kind of disturbing, Aberjam. Darren says, Andrew the End-Tricker, here's the thing, drinking game has begun. Well, here's the thing, Darren. Max says, Anti-Trekker is the turd master, the highest degree for eternity. Well, thank you, I think. And Joseph says, Darren, so I'm watching 22 hours of bad CGI. Uh-oh, here we go. I'm not going to even get in there. Aberjab says, there's no situation in which kneeling on someone's neck for 10 minutes is justifiable. Well, that's the thing. And now, I don't know that... I haven't watched the entire video. I don't know that it was kneeling on his neck for the entire 10 minutes. I know that the video is 10 minutes long, but I understand part of that video is the initial arrest and bringing him back to the vehicle and all that, but I don't know the actual timing of it. However, if for the kneeling part was... The only reason you would do that is to basically pacify your suspect, in that if you had a violent suspect and you had to get them down, you had to restrain them so you could basically put restraints on them, the cuffs and all that. Once you've done that, then you don't continue to do that. And if he was continuing to do that, and from what I've seen of it, all signs point to yes, if he was doing this after the suspect was completely pacified and the subject was not actually resisting in the first place, we got some serious problems here, and that officer absolutely deserves to go to jail. And I hope that he spends a long, long time there, to be honest. There are prosecutors and there are terrorists. The moment they started burning buildings, there are protesters and there are terrorists. The moment they started burning buildings and trying to cause mass murder by cutting gas lines and blow up police stations. Right, I understand that, Valor, but here's the problem. You can't accuse everybody in the crowd of one thing or the other. There are, most of these protests, I would say, even in the most violent of these protests, probably about 75% of the people out there are simple protesters. And the problem is that, but they're giving cover, they're passively giving cover to the people that you would call terrorists. And that's why I'm asking people, even if you're outraged over this, don't protest, because you are aiding those that are giving a bad name to your protest. And Brad says, a few bad cops mess up and all of them get blamed. See, and that's the exact opposite thing, and that's true, is that just like this officer that was kneeling on, and I don't even know his name, that's why I don't say what his name is. It's not that I'm trying to protect him, I just don't know what his name is. But the officer that was kneeling on his neck, Obviously there are people that think that's what all the cops do, right? There are people that think that every cop is a racist, that every cop is a jackbooted thug, that kind of thing. And that's not true either. And so, and the problem is, of course, the police have to do their job. But they also, and this is, credit where credit is due, this officer has very quickly been arrested and charged with murder. And that is appropriate. Jeff says, good morning, Mr. Rational Roundtable. Good morning, Jeff, and happy birthday once again. I did not know it was your birthday, but thank you, Bird, for calling that out. MLP Death Dealer says, some of these people are setting buildings on fire, like WTF. Yeah, well, that's the thing. They're anarchists and looters. And just plain violent people. My cousin is a trucker, and he was going through New York and got pelted by bricks and bottles. That's the problem. We need to, that's why I'm saying protesters, stay home and let the police get rid of the rioters. Marlena says cooler heads need to prevail. People are going ape shit and tearing down communities. The media needs to stop putting skin colors against each other. Well, and here's the ironic thing about it, is that obviously a lot of this is over the topic of racism, right? Because of the fact that George was black and the officer was white. However, the majority of these violent protesters are white. Go figure. If anybody was going to be justifiably angry over this, I would think that it would be the black community more than, white kids wearing bandanas that just want to stir some shit up. Sean says, Jesus, you mean the guy who overturned the money changer stalls in the temple? Strange guys say Jesus would stay home. But you see, there's a difference there, and I knew somebody was going to bring that up, because Jesus does on occasion get angry in the Bible. But here's the thing, is that when Jesus was doing that, he was actually doing that because the temple was being desecrated. He was trying to, A, point out what the exact desecration was, and B, defend the temple as opposed to get revenge. It's one thing, for example, if somebody, let's say that you were a witness to what was going on with George Floyd. You were actually there. I think that it would be totally appropriate for someone to try to intervene. Now, granted, you would be putting yourself in a huge amount of risk, right? And again, we go back to, if you want to go to the words of Jesus, there's no greater love than the man who lays down his life for his brother. And if it would be totally appropriate for you to try to restrain the police officer that was kneeling on him, not the other police officers, but the police officer that was kneeling on him, it would be totally appropriate for you to try to restrain him and put a citizen's arrest on him. I would have absolutely no problem with that whatsoever. However, after the fact, guess what? Burning down the neighborhoods and marching the streets is not going to fix anything. Let's see, I already read that. Let's see. There we got, man, there goes the chat. Hold on. There we go. Neil Normie says, have you seen the Salt Lake City video of a copy knocking down an old guy with a stick? I think, with a stick, I think the cops need serious training, especially on respecting the elderly. I'll tweet it to you. I have not seen that particularly, but here's the problem, Neil Normie, and I get it. You can find a million videos of a million different incidents of things that happen. And that doesn't change the fact that the vast majority of police are good people. It doesn't change that the vast majority, if you ask a police officer, hey, is it okay to knock over an old guy with a stick? And I don't know the context of that. I mean, was the old guy did he just rob a liquor store? If so, then maybe it was appropriate. But if the old guy was just walking along and the cop was just being a douche and knocked him over, that's totally different. So I don't know. I would need to know the greater context. Because here's the thing. Just because someone is old, if they commit a crime, that doesn't mean the police aren't bound to restrain him and take him into custody. And you don't assume, just because someone is old doesn't mean they are helpless. All right? I will tell you. Let me tell you a quick story about my grandmother. All right, my grandmother, and I've told this story once or twice before, but it's still, this is a perfect example of this. My grandmother, she died at the age of 99 years old. Now, the first time I ever met her, she was the tender young age of 80. She lived in Yonkers, New York. I grew up in California, and this was the first time for her to ever go to the West Coast, and she came out to visit us. And my parents decided to take her to one of the world-class restaurants in San Francisco. She had never been to the West Coast at all, let alone the famous restaurants of San Francisco, so my parents figured they'd take her for a treat. And keep in mind, my grandmother, 80 years old, was about 4'2", 100 pounds soaking wet. All right, so just exactly what you picture if you think of the term little old lady. So while they're walking from the car to the restaurant, a man makes the mistake of trying to grab her purse. Now, of course, she's from New York and an elderly woman, so the correct term is pocketbook. They try to snatch her pocketbook. Now, my grandmother kept a brick in her pocketbook for just such an emergency. And as the guy tried to grab it, she swung her pocketbook around like it was a weapon and laid the guy out, smacking him upside the head with a freaking brick-laden pocketbook. You do not simply assume that because they are old, they are weak and helpless. That's a good way to get yourself in trouble. So, I'm not defending necessarily what the cop did to this old guy with a stick, and I don't know if you mean the old guy had a stick or the cop did it with a stick. I'm not sure there, but in either case, if this old guy had just committed a crime or the cop was trying to restrain him, there may have been a reason for it. If not, well, then the cop was just being a douche. Phantom Menace says, I mean tourism. I was going to say that, but I was trying to say, oh, okay, I'm not sure. I missed something there, fandom. And let's see. Jeff says thank you to Bird of Prey, and yes, thank you, Bird of Prey. I didn't see if Jeff requested another one yet, but I'm working. Oh, and yes, he did. Uber Chat number 13. All right, so I will play Uber Chat number 13 in honor of Jeff's birthday here, which why you would want that, I don't know, but I guess it's because he's saying thank you to Bird of Prey.
Answer. One does not understand the question.
Can you let us hear the probe's transmission?
Yes, sir. On speakers.
The president did say it was directed at Earth's
Modify the probe signals, accounting for density, temperature, and salinity factors.
I can try, sir.
Son of a bitch!
I think I have it, sir.
You son of a bitch, Anthony Tracker!
And this is what it would sound like underwater.
Yes, sir.
You son of a bitch, Anthony Tracker! Bird of prey.
Fire!
Oh, man, there was lightning right here.
Jeez. All right, so there we go. Jeff put us all through a little bit of pain there, but thank you, Jeff, and happy birthday once again. MC said, good morning, everyone. Hey, MC, how you doing? Darren says, murder cop's wife also filed for divorce this week. I don't know if that helps him or hurts him. Oh, man, that's true. Abijah says, coroner's report gave the exact time his neck was knelt on. It was 9 minutes and some seconds. I did not know that, but thank you. And Aravac Sonder puts a couple of bucks in. We'll wait for the automated disembodied voice here. But interesting question. Let's see. Let's just waiting. There it is. Hello, world.
I got him! Great kid! Don't get cocky!
What can we do in lieu of protesting?
So that is the $10 million question, right? So what is the appropriate response? And here's the thing. So passive resistance, like Dr. King was famous for, is one thing you could consider. But passive resistance, so let me explain for just a minute. It doesn't mean causing general mayhem and like, I understand that like people like would get on Highway 101 in California and I-5 in Portland, Oregon and stuff like that, and just basically try to cause massive inconvenience for the general population. I don't think that that's necessarily going to do anything except piss people off. But I do think that, for example, a sit-in style of protest at the police stations, a sit-in style of protests around city halls, things like that would be appropriate. I think that marches are inherently dangerous because that marches tend to cause these types of situations to erupt. I also do think, first and foremost, we need to send our support and love to the family of George Floyd. I don't know if they have like a GoFundMe or anything like that set up or anything official for support for the family, but we should try to help out there. We should absolutely offer our support and prayers to the rest of the police that are dealing with the fact that so many people now distrust and hate them over what's been going on. So there's a lot we can do, but marching the streets and giving active cover for people that want to commit acts of violence is not going to help anybody. And what we actually do is going to depend on what we are capable of doing. If we are in a position to where all we can do is give a couple of bucks to the family of George Floyd, then do that. If we're, and Mercer Create puts a couple of bucks in. Thank you so much, Mercer. And we'll wait for the thingy here. But I think that, but the important thing is do not do things that set up for destruction. And that's unfortunately what happens with these marches. And any day now, boy, the computer, I don't know what's up with the computer, or it's not the computer, it's actually Streamlabs, but yeah, there it is.
I got him! Great kid! Don't get cocky!
I am happy to be your first super chat ever.
Indeed, and yes, Mercer is the first official super chatter to this channel, and so yes, thank you, Mercer. And thank you once again for the $2. I do appreciate it. And by the way, I know it was appropriately hidden because it used the H word, but someone, Scott actually asked, would it be okay to kneel on the former leader of Germany from the 1940s neck for 10 minutes? No, it would not. And so, sorry, no, it wouldn't. That's, as far as, unless, just like I said, the person was, in fact, actively, physically resisting. That's the only time you use a move like that is to pacify someone. But it shouldn't take you 10 minutes to get the cuffs on them. And so that's the thing. And my understanding is that George was completely restrained. So there was, you know, what he was doing was absolutely inappropriate. Neo Normie says there have been the N-word, N-word associated with white supremacy in the crowds and ancient provocateurs who are police in some of these protests. Really the most disturbing was the child militia in Atlanta. It looked creepy. I have not seen that one. And it sounds like I'm glad I haven't. Sean says it does matter why Jesus did it. It does matter why Jesus did it. It's still vandalism. Well, I think you tried to say doesn't matter, and actually, no, it was not vandalism. He was not in any way, shape, or form desecrating the temple. Overturning the vandalism is the destruction of property. what he was doing was disruption, but it was not vandalism. And if he and I understand what you're saying, but that doesn't, just because Jesus did that in that specific instance does not mean carte blanche you can commit acts of violence every time something bad happens. You do have to look at what the motivation was. Was Jesus doing it out of revenge? The answer is no. He was not trying to get back at anybody. He was trying to stop an evil practice. He was trying to intervene as opposed to get revenge. And and at best, if you want to be as kind as you possibly can to the people setting fires and committing acts of violence, it's revenge. That's the absolute best way you can paint it. And really, it's more opportunistic. There have been plenty of abusive behavior with all people, not just black, white, while they're innocent. An incident last year of a 16-year-old taser for 28 seconds, which gave him brain damage. I understand that, Neo-Normie, and I'm not but here's the problem. Again, we need to not blow things out of proportion. If you have, I don't know what the current number is, but, and in fact, let's see if we can find it. How many are in the U.S.? All right, so as of right now, there are, let's see, 17,985 United States police agencies. And what is it, Auntie? Why are you whining? Hold on just a minute. Auntie wants to go. Hold on. I'll be right back.
Good beer. No, it's not made of koala. It's made of rue. But it's brewed. It's brewed manly. Like our...
Okay, so as of 2018, there were 686,665 police officers in the United States. So just for use round numbers, say 700,000 cops. So if you have 100 incidents of police officers doing inappropriate things, that still means that 699,900 cops are not doing those things. And so we have to put it in perspective. All right, and I get it. Every time we see something like this, it makes our blood boil. But we have to be very, very cautious about just saying, oh, look at how horrible the police are. There were at least a dozen incidents last year of police officers doing these inappropriate things. Yeah, out of 700,000 cops. See what I'm saying? Let's see. Valor says, I was called a racist for being against those terrorist thugs, and I support the entire police force, but because not all officers are bad. Well, and that's the thing. Both sides have a legit point, right? On the one hand, calling, for example, you can't call everybody who's marching in a protest a terrorist and thug, right? Only the people that actually commit acts of violence. And it's very hard to differentiate between the two, and that becomes a problem. On the flip side, yeah, you can't call every cop a racist or a jackbooted thug just because there are some cops that do racist and jackbooted things. And so in both cases, we have to be very careful. Now, on the police side, it's a little bit more obvious what they can do. You know, as far as when they do have a bad apple, they need to treat it harshly. The rest of the police need to not try to defend that person and simply say, this person did something wrong and we're going to string them up for it. Not literally, obviously, but, you know, put them on trial, get them charged with an appropriate crime, put them in jail, all that. Make it clear that that type of behavior will not be tolerated. And fortunately, in this particular case, I think they did a fairly good job of that. Darren says, I like the news broadcast from MSNBC where the reporter is stating that the protests aren't violent while a building is burning down behind him. That's funny. You know, and that's, you know, and then you do have the news media, and the news media in this case is egging it on. They are loving it, right? And it doesn't matter which news media you're talking about, whether you're talking about Fox or CNN or MSNBC or whatever. They are all loving this because this makes for good, sexy headlines for them. America on fire, America under siege. You know, innocent protesters attacked by the jackbooted thugs. Whatever you want to say, right? It makes it so that they can sell their story, and that's what they like to do. And so, I mean, obviously, I think the biggest leeches in our society are the modern media, and it's not a left-wing, right-wing thing. I mean, they're all leeches. Neo Normie says, the old guy was literally walking to cross the road, and the cops were setting up a line, and they were hurrying him, and one shoved him from behind. I don't know you know, like I said, I only have what you said there, but if he was waiting to cross the road and okay, what was he doing there? Why were the cops setting up a line? I mean, is this something that happened during one of the protests? In which case, what is this old guy doing in the middle of a protest? Was he a protester? And if the cops are lining up and they're basically going to say, hey, we're going to start pushing people out, guess what? They can't make adjustments just because you have one old guy in the crowd. But I don't know. I'd have to see the whole thing. And let's see. MLP Death Dealer says, damn. Not sure why. Tim says, that's awesome. A brick book. I missed something. Jeff is saying hi to Mrs. Antrigger. Aberjeff says, recently saw a video of a cop dragging a 50-something housewife from her car and tasing her. If you saw that, you'd be outraged. But if you see the whole video, it's totally justified. Well, and that's the problem. We have to be very careful about judging things based on a edited video clip, which we do get sometimes, right? You know, I know that because such videos can be very disturbing, many times people don't want to watch the entirety of the 10-minute video of the George Floyd situation, right? I haven't seen it myself. I'm not going to lie. I'm only going on what people I trust have told me about it. But if you have a situation where, you know, say someone commits some horrendous act and then the police show up and drag them away kicking and screaming, but all you see is the police dragging them away kicking and screaming, it's very easy to paint an inappropriate picture. Jeff says, I thought it would be appropriate. No problem, Jeff. Miles of Elysium says, bravo, anti-Gran. She sounded like she was an amazing, feisty old woman. Yes, indeed, she was. I learned very early on, never mess with an old lady from New York. Just says it will wake everyone up. That is true. I was the first person to ever leave Anti-Checker Super Chat. That is very true, Mercer. Robert says, hello today. Who remembers the Rodney King rioting? Well, yeah, and the Rodney King rioting is interesting, too. You know, and here's the thing. It started out as genuine outrage over what happened to Rodney King, right? And the fact that the 4 cops were ridiculously acquitted. Now, the big problem there and the lesson learned is don't, and remember when I said before, you don't press charges against someone because you're mad at them. And that's what happened in the case of the 4 cops of in the Rodney King incident, is that the 4 cops were charged with, I believe, first-degree murder. And the problem here is that they didn't commit first-degree murder. And in fact, because you have to show their intent to kill Rodney King, right? Now, yes, Rodney King ended up dying. That doesn't mean that they intended to kill him. Or Rodney King didn't end up dying, but I'm saying it had Rodney, that's what it was. They charged him with attempted murder. That's what it was. I'm sorry. Brain was a little fuzzy. So they charged him with attempted murder because they're basically saying that these 4 cops were trying to kill Rodney King. Rodney King obviously didn't end up dying. But what did happen, the problem with that is that you have 4 armed, trained police officers taking on one guy All right. And yes, was Rodney King a thug? Yeah, I'm not defending all of Rodney King's actions, but if those 4 cops wanted to kill Rodney King, he would have been dead. All right. So you could definitely, as far as appropriate charges, would have been excessive force, assault, aggravated assault, those kinds of things. But attempted murder means that they were attempting to kill him. Every single one of those cops had guns. Every single one of those cops had billy clubs. If they wanted to kill him, he would have been dead. That was a completely inappropriate charge, and so the cops were acquitted. And that's why you do not charge police with inappropriate charges. If the officer had clear, clearly the ability and to kill someone, and they don't, you don't charge them with attempted murder. Or if the cop, for example, if a cop might use too much force but wasn't trying to kill the guy, you don't charge him with murder, right? You might charge him with manslaughter. It just depends on the actual incident. You make the charge fit the crime. You don't charge someone with murder just because it sounds better. All right, so yeah. Let's see. Darren says, what do you mean Jeff put us through the campaign here? You made the freaking super chat. That's true, but you don't have to pay for it. Darth Revan talking to Mrs. Antrinker. Jeff says, oh no, I'm sorry to hear that. I've been down quite a bit lately. Oh, to Mrs. Antrinker. In lieu of protesting, Christians are supposed to pray. That is also true. Average Jeff says, no, so the $1 million question is, how are you going to get it in the hole? Just ask Bird. Well, that's a whole different thing. That's a whole different thing. I live in South Carolina. Hell flew a few years ago. Wasn't any protest and rioting when the cop in Charleston, South Carolina, that shot a black guy in the back, and unfortunately he died also. Well, it's also interesting to see, like, sometimes when there's an incident of police violence, sometimes it triggers outrage, sometimes it triggers protests, sometimes it triggers full-on rioting, right? And in this particular case, this was an incredibly egregious case, right? There have been some cases that have been kind of borderline that you could argue defending the police. There are some cases where obviously the video has been edited and stuff like that to make the police look worse than they were. So it depends. There have been cases where I've looked at it and said, well, yeah, the cops were doing their job. And unfortunately, the suspect died. But when they described what happened, the police were following proper procedure. There are other cases where it's like, whoa, those cops were way out of line. I just saw where Anonymous shut down the, I always get my abbreviations mixed up for M states. MN is that Minnesota website, and claimed that they were going to expose corrupt police and shut down sites of organizations that attack protesters. Thoughts on this? Yeah, Anonymous needs to go away. I'm sorry. They're just trying to be relevant again. Anonymous is a joke. And I'm sorry. And if they want to shut me down, they can. I'm sure I can't stop them. But I'm sorry. The idea that, the police are attacking protesters. No. You know what? Shut up. When you have people burning down city buildings, when you have people committing assault in mass against the police, that is not the police attacking protesters. That is the police trying to maintain order. So they need to shut up. But the Anonymous is basically a group of anarchists anyway. And so they of course want to side with the people who are burning down the buildings because they think that's awesome. I don't. Neil Normie says, problem is twofold. The American police are being trained by the Israeli Defense Force, and the prison industrial complex looking for people up for profit means arrests on a quota. Well, Neil Normie, first of all, the training from the Israeli Defense Force is not the problem, because proper hand-to-hand combat training is essential for police, and I don't think they get enough of it, to be honest. And in fact, one of the best ways to prevent people from being killed is to get the have the officers be master fighters, because then they have more control over the situation as opposed to struggling. All right. Where the problem is that cop may, he may not have, that may be the only move he knows is to put his knee in the back of someone's neck in order to restrain them, even though he didn't need to keep doing it after they had him restrained, obviously. And I really doubt the Israeli Defense Force training says, oh yeah, and once you got them pacified, yeah, you keep crushing their neck. I don't think that that's the case. As far as prison industrial complex locking people up for profit means arrests on a quota, again, you are also, that's a misconception. Yes, it's true that privatized prisons get paid a certain amount per prisoner in order to maintain them. However, A, they generally pay the private industries less than the actual cost would be for the public-run prisons. And B, they don't then tell the police to arrest more people so the prison companies can make more money. And I know there are some people, oh no, they do, and then with no evidence, but you go right ahead and say that. But unless I see hard evidence that says that the police in various cities are bumping up arrests just to make more money for the private prisons, I'm not going to buy that. And I'm not a conspiracy theorist, so there's that. And quite frankly, we need to stop making the issue about things that aren't the issue. All right. The issue was you had a cop that used excessive force and that didn't have emotional control in that situation. And that's what needs to be addressed. All right. This is just like there are some people trying to make this about gun control. There are some people trying to make this about, a million other issues. This is about cops showing restraint and cops understanding and having a cool head and better combat training, to be honest. Do you even know why there were money changers inside the temple? Yes. The money changers, the concept of the money changers was to make it more convenient for people to offer their sacrifices at the temple. What they would do is you were supposed to go to the temple and bring your tithe, whether it be 5 goats or 2 sheep or an ox or whatever that tithe may appropriately be based on your occupation. However, it was a major hassle if you lived 100 miles away to bring your goats 100 miles. So instead, what you would do is get cash, go to the temple, buy a couple of goats, and then give them as your tithe. That's the whole concept of the money changers, right? Here's the thing. The money changers were gouging the people. They were making an obscene profit off of this because, hey, why not, right? So, and so, for example, it would be like, let's say if you have a church today and the church expects you to donate a coat to help out people that are homeless, right? And so they have a coat collection thing. But they not only do they want you to bring a coat, they make it a requirement that you donate a coat. And if you don't show up with a coat, they're selling coats in the lobby so that you can donate a coat. But that $20 coat, they're going to sell to you for $50 because you didn't think to bring a coat in on your own, right? That's what pissed off Christ. He wasn't pissed off just because people were selling goats. He was pissed off because people were gouging people and making an obscene profit in order for those people to fulfill their requirements to God. All right, and that's why he said that you've turned my house of prayer into a den of thieves. And it's vandalism. The money got mixed. Nobody knew or how much, and the crowd would take some. Loss of property is vandalism. Well, vandalism is actually the destruction of property, if my understanding is correct. But let's look it up. I don't know for sure. Let's see. Vandalism, an action involving the deliberate destruction or damage to public or private property. There you go. the deliberate destruction or damage to public or private property. Flipping a table? Is that deliberate destruction? No. It's disruption. But even so, even if you want to say that that's vandalism because, oh no, their money got mixed up, he was defending the integrity of the temple. He was not getting revenge for anything. That's the point. Marcus says, I've got to go. Take care all, and thanks for the show as always. Absolutely, Marcus, you take care. Resolute says, what do you think about the conspiracy theory of Antifa and the deep state collusion being behind the riots? I don't buy into why would first of all, I don't know anything about it, but you're suggesting that Antifa and the state are colluding to create riots? To what end? There has to be a logical end to it, but I'm not into conspiracy theories. Aberjab says, a year or two black, a white dude was gunned down by cops in a hotel hallway. He was face on the ground in his undies with his hands on his head when they shot him. No riots. I don't know about that particular incident, Dabberjam, but again, some incidents catch. It's just like, why is it that we didn't write the canon has not gotten 8 million views on YouTube? If you look at the quality of that song and everything, why hasn't it got 8 million views on YouTube? But PewDiePie farts and it gets 8 million views, right? Just because something may be, some things catch on, some things don't. We need our Gabriel Bell. No, we really don't. People seem to forget that we have a court system for crimes like this. Things are moving swiftly against Murder Cop. He's going to answer his crimes. Rioters have no justification. Agreed. I don't have a problem with protests, but yeah, the rioters have absolutely no justification in this case because it's not like they're not doing anything. It's not like the justice system is just sitting back and calling a mulligan on this one. Neil Normie says, UK police have 2 tiers training. The first year police academy, the second is community support. Officers are trained in lowering tension in situations. There are 32 criminal deaths last year. Okay. I Skyped you a video of the old guy. It's short. I will check it out, Bird. But I'm not going to watch it right now. I don't feel like, this isn't a reaction to horrible things video. I think body cameras and video recording can be useful to resolve disputes over who did what. The truth shall set you free. And the chat just jumped. And let me see, where was I? Oh, the truth shall set you free. There are useful tools out there which need more use. And Mortimus puts in $5. Thank you so much.
I got him! Great kid! Don't get cocky!
Good morning. You just was thinking you need a 3D printed turd cup to drink your coffee. Maybe we could even buy one from you?
Here's the problem with that. I love the idea, but the resin and stuff is not certified as food safe. So, and neither is the PLA plastic that I use on the other printer is not airtight, so it wouldn't work very well. So I can't do, stuff like that. What I could do, and I've thought about it, is like design something that would fit around an existing mug, and I may do something like that to make a turd cup. Anyway, but thank you though, my friend. I do appreciate it. And as far as the truth shall set you free, the useful tools which would need more use. Well, body cams are good for after the fact, as far as, you're right, determining what happened in an incident. I'm not opposed to body cams whatsoever. But that still doesn't change. But if we want to prevent the incident from happening in the first place, not just get to the bottom of, the details of the incident, but to try and prevent the incident, what the police need is, honestly, better combat training, more combat training. And I know people think, wow, that's crazy. If you make the police better fighters, how is that going to, help the situation? And it's very simple. If you are a martial arts master, right, a true master, I'm not talking about some guy that took, 6 weeks of karate at a little strip mall place, but someone who is a true martial arts master never gets emotionally involved when they fight. They're not brawlers, right? They are in total, absolute control all of the time. Everything they do is well thought, well planned, well executed. and they learn how to react to certain things, how to how to counter any potential incoming threat, etc. Now, compare that to a true brawler, right? You may have someone who is powerful, who is well armed, who is well defended or whatever, but they're not well trained. They become emotionally compromised, and bam, things get out of control very, very easily. And as long as they have a higher level of power and ability than the person they're fighting, then people tend to get seriously hurt. That's why, by the way, more people get hurt in barroom brawls than in martial arts tournaments, you know. Anonymous shut down the... I already read that, I think. Oh, and that's a little bit different. Plot shift says, Anonymous shut down Minnesota government website threatening to expose crooked cops and retaliate against groups. Do you think they'll act on this given huge protests? Well, first of all, I don't take anything Anonymous does seriously. I don't. Anonymous to me is a group of people that are attention whores, but they also want to be anonymous because they want to do bad things and basically be cheered for it. And I'm not going to cheer them. I have nothing to say about them. I'm not going to give them anything on my show. The reason why the 4 cops of Rodney King beating got off, among other things, is because the jury saw the footage while the rest of the world saw only less than 8 seconds of the video. Well, that's true, too. Is that they didn't see, like, obviously Rodney King was clearly resisting arrest at the beginning of the footage, if you haven't seen the whole thing. However, the flip side of that is once they had him down, they did continue to beat him. They did use excessive force. And I don't think there's any denying that. But they charged him with attempted murder. That was a completely inappropriate charge. Sean says, that's okay. You're forgiving. My brain is often fuzzy on Sunday mornings. I'm forgiving? Well, sometimes. One of the legal definitions of murder includes accidental death during committing a felony. So if the cops were committing a felony in the beating, it can be argued as attempted murder. Well, except they didn't. In the case of Rodney King, they didn't kill him.
I got him!
And so, and Rock Solid put in a
Where's
couple
the
of bucks.
giant asteroid when we deserve it? 15.
Wow, you want the giant asteroid? That's dark.
Sir, we are being hailed. On screen. What is your problem?
I am Lore.
Do you need help?
I have a YouTube channel. My YouTube channel is Lore Reloaded.
Let me guess, their rubber band broke, right?
I make YouTube go.
I was trying to figure out why I was feeling so cold in here, and so I grabbed my little thermostat thing, and for somehow these, I love the Nest thermostat. It's designed to like anticipate your, what you would do, but it's like drop the temperature down like 5 degrees cooler than I normally would. I have no idea why. Anyway, So anyway, if you want to say, so if one of the legal definitions of murder, well, keep in mind, first of all, Vile, is that the definition of murder is different in every state. Murder is a state offense, and in some states, for example, in the state where this took place, there's third-degree murder. Most states only have first- and second-degree murder. Some states have various levels of manslaughter charges that supplement the murder charge. Other states don't. Right, where they might have a general homicide charge, and so murder is, from a legal perspective, has a different meaning almost anywhere you go. But you're saying so in California, I presume, because that's where you are, that one of the legal definitions of murder includes the accidental death during committing a felony. So if the cops were committing a felony in the beating, it could be argued as attempted murder. No, because that's you're still trying to attempted murder is the intent to kill someone, right? And that is a specific definition in California statutes. Attempted murder is the attempt to kill someone. If you hurt somebody very badly, then that could be aggravated assault. Unless you were trying to kill them, in which case it would be attempted murder. So the problem is that you're right. If murder can include accidental death, well, if the cops had accidentally killed Rodney King, then you could say, well, that's that level of murder. But you can't say if they might have if you want to say, well, they might have accidentally killed them, then you could say any type of assault, any type of violence against another person is attempted murder. Because, oh, well, it could have resulted in an accidental death. Heck, how about this? How about running with scissors is now attempted murder? See? Airback says, can you explain what is Antifa? I'm not a big expert on Antifa. My understanding is that they are a radical left-wing group that advocates violence. And I personally have, everywhere they go, trouble tends to follow. Darren says, everybody is a conspiracy theorist. To a certain extent, you're right, in that we all try to put together pieces to put to solve mysteries. That's kind of human nature. But a conspiracy theorist is a person who basically sees a actualized conspiracy in everything. I don't think that, for example, just because X happens, I don't think that person A and B conspired to cause X to happen, right? So, for example, this cop obviously did a horrible thing to George, right? That doesn't mean that there was a conspiracy of police officers to do something to George. It just means that cop did a horrible thing. Darth Ren says, our police don't have guns. Good for them. Ours do. Darth Ren says, but what if you didn't worship in the temples and you were a Jew? What would happen? Well, you didn't go to the temple. Keep in mind that in the practice of the day, the temple wasn't where you go every Sunday, or Saturday, right? We're not talking about like a Jewish synagogue today. The temple was a very specific place in Jerusalem that all Jews were to go annually. And it wasn't a suggestion. All right, so if you were a practicing Jew, you went to the temple to deliver to the priest. How would a goat herder stay in business if they had to tithe their best goats or even their best single goat every week? Every year, Darren. It was not a weekly tithe. In the tradition of the tithe is a tenth. That's all tithe really means. But at the time you would give, like, because you wouldn't, like, obviously you couldn't give, if you have a herd of you would give a tenth of your production every year, right? So if you have a significant herd of goats and you have 50 baby goats that year, you give your 5 best new baby goats to the temple. Cops in Ireland, apart from highly trained mobile armed units, are unarmed and trained in fighting and submission. There are a lot of a-hole cops, but they have no deaths in arrest. Well, there you go. And if they are highly trained, that's good. So is building graffiti vandalism? Nothing has been destroyed. No, but it has been damaged. And yes, graffiti is vandalism. Because you have to repair. What Jesus was upset about is the high fees they were charging. Of course, they would be out of a job with the temples if the temples accepted Roman money. They would be out of a job if temples, well, I'm not sure. But yeah, I said that's what Jesus was upset about. It was the gouging of people for basically converting their cash into a proper tithe. Now, Rudy Giuliani is slamming the Minneapolis PD and claiming that progressives don't know how to police their own states. Okay. You see, but that's the problem. And I saw Trump do this a little bit too. On the one hand, I applaud Trump for speaking out about support for George and all that, and how outraged he is over what happened. However, this is where the politics comes in. This is where the Republicans are trying to say, "Oh, see, look at how horrible these Democrats are leading Minneapolis." Really, you're going to turn it into that? How about this cop needs to go to jail? That's it. All right, so they're turning it into a conspiracy like the mayor of Minneapolis is directly responsible for what happened here. Now, he's indirectly responsible in that he is the mayor, but they are obviously acting upon it. In some communities right now, the police will stop you from going to a store to shop, but they won't stop you from burning one down. That is true. And that's, yeah, there's no consistency. That's true. There was an isolated event. If this was an isolated event, I'd agree. But I think there are multiple deaths and injuries with excessive force by bully cops. But really, why is there rioting? Also, the DNC and GOP. Well, there are multiple deaths and injuries every year, sure, and that has to do with poor training more than anything else, like we've talked about. And I'm sorry, in a nation of 350 million people, and I mean, because everybody likes to try to say, well, we do it better because, yeah, you have a nation of like 1/100th of our population. It's a lot easier to manage. I don't know what the population of Ireland is these days, but you know, it's not apples to apples, right? A population of Ireland, 4.9 million. Wow. Compared to 350 million in the United States. So a little different. All right. But anyway, at 350 million population, this is an isolated incident. It's not like, here's the thing, it wouldn't be an isolated if in order for this to be a pattern, we would have to see like dozens of these incidents every day. You know, people don't understand the massive amount of people that is the population of this country. They genuinely believe that, you know, 3 guys die in 6 months establishes a huge pattern of cops on the rampage, right? No, 3 people with 700,000 cops, right? We have 700,000 cops. 3 of them did something bad in 6 months. That's not a pattern. Since you're so into 3D printing, British money is made from plastic now. Just saying. Oh, I did not know that. Not that I'm going to actually attempt anything. George has already restrained. More martial arts training is irrelevant. No, it's absolutely not irrelevant, Sean. You make it sound, and this is a problem. A lot of people, maybe it's because I've taken martial arts and I understand it, but I don't know if you have or not. However, martial arts is not just about how to throw a punch and how to throw a kick, right? It's also about maintaining mental discipline, about maintaining control. This officer was not in control. He may have been dominant in the situation, but emotionally, he was not in control. If he was, then George would not have been dead. Our police are given 3 to 6 months training, not nearly enough time to learn how to de-escalate high-stress situation. Well, honestly, training should be an ongoing thing throughout the career of a police officer, right? I would say 3 to 6 months training to get started is fine, but you're also put with, if a new cop coming out of the academy is then put with a seasoned cop who is always the lead officer on every single incident. And every cop spends at least 1 day out of their work week training. Every cop continues to take combat training and everything on a daily basis. Every cop continues to train from the day that they join to the day that they retire. But unfortunately, we don't do that because that costs money. Darth Maul says, I'm about an hour east of Los Angeles, and my town has these protesters are out here setting off fireworks for the last few days. Yeah, and that's the thing. So, here's the funny thing. So these protesters are all spontaneous protests that are just there because they care about what happened. Where did they get the illegal fireworks? Just wondering. Because, you know, I lived in California most of my life. Well, most of my young life. I said not most of my life now. Wow, I'm old. But but yeah, those types of fireworks, illegal. You know, so they had them prepped already. You don't need to kill someone for it to be attempted murder. Yeah, I know, but the point is you have to attempt to kill somebody for it to be attempted murder. Hence the term attempted. And that's the point, BioMike. Attempted murder is a very specific charge. Attempted murder means you were trying to kill someone. Not that you could have accidentally killed them. Right? And so, because your argument was that, well, if murder includes accidental death, which in most cases it doesn't, but apparently if you're in California it does, so, you know, be careful. But if murder includes accidental death, well, then would attempted murder mean someone could have accidentally died? Is that what you're trying to say? Because that's where you're saying that, you know, because there's no way to charge someone with attempted murder just because they could have accidentally died, because in every circumstance ever, someone could have accidentally died. You know what? If you go skydiving, someone could have accidentally died. So does that mean the pilot of the plane is guilty of attempted murder? No, of course not. That would be stupid. Attempted murder is the attempt to kill someone. And fortunately, you failed. Can one really say at this point humans don't deserve the giant asteroid? No. But, you know. They made, let's see. They made a public Facebook post that they'll march downtown peaceably, and that's about 15 minutes from now. God be with all of us. Good luck. California has some insane laws now. Apparently, yes. Running with scissors, like in Frasier in Cheers. Well, I don't know. I don't remember that particular incident. Darth Ren says, back in the day, failed suicide attempt was an attempted murder. Okay. I could see it being attempted homicide. Everyone is a conspiracy theorist. That's a conspiracy theory. Antifa are thugs who never let peaceful protests go on without a riot. Well, like I said, I don't care about who Antifa are. I don't care about who's responsible. What I care about is that the violence needs to stop. And that's the problem. We're all, and we have this tendency to do this, every single one of us, and we've got to break ourselves of this, honestly. We're all obsessed over who to blame. We don't need to blame anybody. We just need to stop it. Let's see. Okay, forgot about the yearly tithe versus the weekly tithe. My bad. Thanks for reminding me. No, that's all right. My heart aches for what's going on here and in the U.S. As of last night, Canada was mentioned too. All we can do is pray. Indeed. Are you on top chat? No, I am in live chat. Our church is open today, but that protest I mentioned is just up the street. Well, good luck. I'm not like Darren Wagner in believing the earth is flat, but I don't believe that we have ever been to the moon. Well, that's fine. Again, I would say to what end? I mean, what's the point in faking the moon landing other than to try and say we did it and they didn't? But, you know. So do you believe that H3 is a real thing? Just wondering. Politics need to stop being a team sport. Right is right, wrong is wrong, regardless if there's a D or R after someone's name. I agree. Darthan says, do you ever wonder what Jesus' sense of humor was like? Yes, quite frequently, actually, because sometimes you listen, you read certain passages in the Bible, and you're like, was Jesus actually being serious there, or was he kidding? You know, there are actually, yeah, I do wonder what he was like. The population of Ireland is the equivalent to a city in the city of Los Angeles. Yeah. How's the leg and how's your walking? Thanks for asking, Darth. Sucks and sucks. Let's see. And let's see. Aberjan says, read carefully. Martial arts can be difficult to learn, but marital arts are far more tricky. Wait, is that what you said? Martial arts can be difficult to learn. But yeah, marital arts are far more tricky. Yeah, whatever. Dot Dealer says, Cartman, you whack discipline. Yes. At first took me a minute. I was like, what? If TJ Hooker had arrested George Floyd, he would still be alive. Andy Taylor, too. Maybe even Sledgehammer. No, Sledgehammer, I think, would have just blown up the whole city. Anti-checker, old, confirmed. That is true. Darth Redmond says, Darth Huster, for him to see it, better put up an anti-checker. Oh, Darth Huster says, oh, British money is like Anniversary 2000 Monopoly money. It was thin and flexible. You could buy them online. Interesting. I did not know that. That's weird. They are planning peaceful protest march in my city this evening, praying for calm. Indeed. And that's the problem. They say they're planning a peaceful protest march, but then here's the problem, is that it always attracts the people that want to commit violence. Attempted nerder, is that when you try to get someone into Star Trek? Yes, that's absolutely true. Christopher Cole says, my comment wasn't meant to blame, but give a definition of Antifa. I agree with you. We need to be the change we want to see in the world, but there will be those who don't want change. Indeed. But if we can stand up to a higher level, if we can be that shining example, then maybe, just maybe, we can make the world a little bit better. Robert says, what's H3? Well, H3 is a helium isotope that is apparently only regularly found on the surface of the moon and can be used as a stabilizing agent in fusion reactors, allowing fusion reaction to take place over an extended period of time, because right now fusion reaction can only be maintained for a very brief time because the shielding around a fusion reactor breaks down very quickly, and H3 helps prevent the shielding breaking down. It has to do with I'm not a nuclear physicist, obviously, but you infuse the H3 into the isotopes that you use for the fusion reaction, blah 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 blah, makes it so that it puts out less particles that are destructive to the shielding. The problem is that the only way to get H3 is from the surface of the moon, because H3 doesn't penetrate our atmosphere. It's constantly emitted from the sun, however. And so the moon's surface is littered with it. And so if we had a decent supply, that's why I think Elon Musk wants to build an industrial complex on the moon so he can harvest H3, corner the market on it, and make even more money. Adrian says, the motivation behind faking the moon landing would be about political posturing, convincing global powers that you are more technologically advanced than you actually are, etc. Okay. Then, but here's the thing. And I mean, genuinely curious. How did they pull off the visual effects? Because, you know, they really did a great job. And, you know, so I'm curious. How did they do it? As a fellow peg-legger tip, when you're out and resting, put your leg on the cane. Also, get some soft grip on the handle and mind your wrist. Mine hurts after a long day of walking. Well, I actually have I don't have it upstairs with me right now, but I have a really nice cane that I got that's got a good, comfortable hand grip. I'm getting 2 friends into Star Trek. It's awesome seeing their journey through Trek. Very cool. Rock Solid says, if Hillary would have won, this cop would still have existed, and this likely would have still sadly happened. Would it still been Trump's fault asking for a friend? Well, that's the problem. It's not, you know, and I know there are people that blame Trump. There are people that blame the mayor of Minneapolis. There are people that are going to point at whose fault it is. The person whose fault it is that cop, period. What kind of shielding they use in fusion reactor? Regular reactors use water. I don't remember. I'm not an expert on it. I've read a few articles on it, but I'm not recently, so I couldn't tell you.
Hello, world.
And slash dot dash is in the house. Throws a £1.99, says.
Nearly 3 years. Where's my ship you promised? Man shrugging.
First of all, it hasn't been nearly 3 years. It's been about 2. But I will tell you, I am working on it right now, my friend. In fact, what you see right there is the printer in action. Unfortunately, and I'm so close, it's like ridiculous, but I did run into a problem with the printer itself. I'll go on a slight tangent here for just a minute since you mentioned it, Slash. Is that printer is fully capable of printing these ships. I've been experimenting with the best way to print them and very, very close to starting to actually send them out. However, the printer uses a lead screw for the Z-axis, and it seems to be slightly warped. And so it's failing a lot of the time right now whenever I try to print something that's more than an inch or two high. And unfortunately, the ship print needs to be about 3.5 inches high. So I actually reached out to the seller, and they are sending me a replacement device that should arrive on Friday. Right now, like the print that's actually going right now is not a ship. It's actually a stand for the ships because they're shorter. And I'm hoping that I can print a couple of those while I'm waiting for the replacement so that I can get the ships into full production. But yes, they are coming ridiculous. So close, I can taste it. So close. And then what I've said before, and I don't know if you've been watching lately, Slash, but one thing that I've said is that as I promised, I'm going to start distributing them to my Patreon supporters, starting with the supporters that have been around the longest, and then working my way through. And let's see. Talking about Elon Musk, I have to wonder if he's what a real-world combination of Tony Stark and Rain Man would be. No, because he's not as cool as Tony Stark. He just thinks he is. It's Minneapolis, not Minneapolis. Almost as bad as Bird of Prey 5 saying Mario. Actually, you know, it's funny because most people on the West Coast, at least where I'm from, would call it Minneapolis. I've never called it Minneapolis. I've always called it Minneapolis, and I don't know, that's just... It's a regional thing. It's just, and I'm sure if you find it grating, well, sorry, that's just the way I pronounce it. It's a dialect thing. It's kind of like how there are many people around the country, like Bird of Prey 5 is a perfect example, being from the East Coast. He calls the state directly above California Oregon. It's Oregon, but many people call Oregon, and it's very grating to people from Oregon. So yeah, I understand whether we got to the moon. I'm undecided whether we got to the moon in the 60s, but faking it even back then would not be too difficult with a well-crafted soundstage, some wire work, and high-speed cameras. You know, you say that, Aberjam, but even in really high-budget movies, like, for example, Superman the movie, or Superman 2, great example, they showed a fake moon set, and it looks stupid. That's the problem. It's one thing, like, there's certain things that are very difficult to fake, even now, without using massive amounts of CG. And one of those things is the reduced gravity on the moon, not just for, like, for example, someone walking around. Yes, you can hook them up to wires and make them, and they can walk slowly. But then you notice that, and this is the interesting thing, if you pay attention to some of the lunar footage, is that, like, if they're dropping an object, right, it falls slower, right? However, they can move their hand and their mouth and stuff like that at full speed. And so that's something that even today we struggle with. Like, even if you look at a movie like, like Gravity, is probably the closest we've come to being able to replicate that. I think that's the movie, isn't it? Gravity, the one with Sandra Bullock. Anyway, Darren says, Elon Musk is not Tony Stark. He got his money from owning PayPal. He doesn't design anything. And Darth Vader says, I called Chicago. Chicago. I can't say that. Moon conspiracy theorists crack me up. Other countries have taken pictures of the areas we landed and found our equipment still there. If we faked it, why would they perpetrate the lie? Well, that's a good question. And I don't see, that's the thing. And I genuinely don't believe that. So if you look at the footage of the astronauts on the moon, especially in the day, I don't think that we could have faked it. Not that good. Just not that good. Hollywood would, it would basically mean that the government, think about this, people, that the government produced a super duper secret movie 100 times better than the best visual effects that Hollywood could muster at the time. And even until this, until the 21st century could not be matched by Hollywood. Moon conspiracy say, I'm sure that if we faked the moon landing, the Russians or Chinese would have called us out by now. I agree. I hate it when people pronounce Washington, Washington. Yeah, my mom, who is from New York, would pronounce it Washington. And she would also say, did you wash the clothes? Wash. Why would the USSR admit it happened if they were America's sworn enemy? Because apparently conspiracy. Darren says, we've already found the places on Earth where they filmed the moon landing. I'm sure, Darren. I'm sure. I know that I understand that a lot of people, believe that, but I don't. Can't be matched by Hollywood. Have you seen Rammstein's America video? That was made over a decade ago. I'm not. That's not ringing a bell. Rammstein's America. Let me see. What is that? Is that a music video or something? Rammstein's America. What is that? Okay, so it's some idiots. So it's a music video that's supposedly on the moon, and so what? And sure, the setting looks right, but they're not moving like the... and you see, perfect example. They just showed someone kicking dirt, and the dirt fell at full Earth gravity speed, as opposed to at lunar speed, so to speak. So no, it doesn't hold up to the actual moon footage. However, even if it did, you said a decade ago, well, guess what? The moon landing was 50 freaking years ago. Actually, 51, technically. Where was I? Washington, D.C. is not the state of Washington. For some reason, I'm not from America. For some reason, I'm not from America, so I don't know why. Right, Washington, D.C. is on the eastern side of the United States, while Washington State is on the west coast. Your mom is from New York? Which part? Yonkers. How do you pronounce... Wow, I don't even know how to say that word. I don't even know what it is. Better yet, if we faked the moon landing, why didn't the Soviets do it also? Good question. Rammstein's America was not a compliment. In your video is titled, What Would Jesus Do? Do you like that people can get jewelry like dog tags with that printed on? Yes and no. I think it's a good enough idea to be a reminder to act like Jesus. Like if you're in a certain circumstance, you should ask yourself, how would Jesus deal with this? However, the problem is that people wear it just a virtue signal. They don't actually wear it because they practice it, and so in that respect it's hypocritical. You don't see me wearing crap like that because I know that I'm not going to advertise what a great and self-righteous person I am, because it's just like if somebody cuts you off in traffic and they have a fish sticker on their car, yeah, you're being real Christian, aren't you? We found the place where NASA trained different surroundings on Earth because they showed us. Well, shh. There's nothing visually spectacular about the moon landing footage. It doesn't hold up. I disagree, Darren. And it's sure if you want to say the cinematography isn't great, sure, you know, because it wasn't. They weren't trying to go for a cinematic look. If you want to, but if you look at the actual physics, the physics, unlike almost every movie ever made, the physics are 100% consistent. One conspiracy is that the footage from the moon landing was so terrible, so they refilmed it. Well, except that here's the problem: it was actually broadcast live. I remember it. I really do think. I think you really need to actually look into the scrutiny of the moon landing footage. Start with the funny thing happened on the way to the moon documentary. Why should I watch a propaganda film? If I want to scrutinize the footage, I'm going to just look at the footage. I'm not going to watch somebody trying to tell me what's wrong with it. I will actually look at it. But you know, I understand you. And so now Darren says the moon landing's physics were simulated with different recording speeds. The problem is that, yeah, Darren says, okay, now you sound like Steve Shives. Really? Really? You're going to go there? Because I am not as skeptical as you. I'm Steve Shives. Whatever. And if it's not spectacular, they didn't film it in 4K. Yeah, that's true. You know, here's I understand, Darren, that you cannot, from a philosophical perspective, Darren, you can't accept the moon landing, right? Because if you're a flat earther, and I get it, and you know I don't hate you or anything, but if you're a flat earther, obviously you have to go on the assumption that the moon landing was fake. So you have to look for excuses for it to be fake. If I'm not a flat earther, if I just look at the footage, I say, does this footage look genuine? It does. You know. But, you know, I understand that, yeah, well, it was on a delay because of the fact that it had to be transmitted. But I understand you probably think that it was all fake. I get it. And I know you weren't always a flat earther, Darren, but I assume that you didn't believe in the moon landing long before you were a flat earther. But even so, at this point, if you granted that the moon landing took place, you would have to reject your flat Earth position as well. How did we get on the fake moon landing on this? We were talking about the frickin' the whole situation with George. But hey, that's all right. And let's see. I'm trying to see if we can find any of the actual footage, but whatever. I'm not going to worry about that right now. Jeff says, I will say this about yesterday's launch. It was very convenient when they lost the camera where the first stage landed. It had not yet landed. They lost feed when they came back. Suddenly the first stage had already landed. You know, I missed that. I wasn't looking at it when it actually happened. I did record it, so I should be able to bring it up. Man on the Moon donated $1.
I got him! Great kid! Don't get cocky!
I live on the moon, your planet is round. Darren knows this, we served together in a war on the moon and he left me behind.
Well, there you go, Darren. Why'd you leave your buddy on the moon? So let me bring up but here's the thing. We've seen as far as the return modules, we've seen them land before in a test firing. But let me bring up the actual footage here.
There in Florida. Just a reminder,
we'll
it's going to be
sound here. We don't need that. And we'll switch over to, there we go. All right, so this is the recording I grabbed. And all right, so that's what you're talking about, I'm assuming. All right, so So there. Let's see. All right, so here we have the deck of the ship. I know they did lose. Okay, so that's where they lost footage. And then they cut to this because they lost the footage. And then, yeah, then it's there. So you could argue that, but here's the, as far as, well, it's awful convenient, except that we've seen them recover it before. I mean, I don't know. If you want to go into your conspiracy theories, sure. Maybe it just didn't work out. It wasn't on a delay. Okay, Darren. Why are you arguing about this? And let's see. I remember the moon landing as well. They rearranged church services for one of them. Darren says the media was filed into a room and allowed to film a film. All right, Darren. There was a TV documentary on recently about a woman who was on an airplane and she saw some kind of barrier when she was looking out a window. That's part of the flat Earth conspiracy. How did they overcome all the radiation in space, especially the Van Allen belt? One of the reasons the Earth's atmosphere. I don't know. I'm not an astrophysicist. You'd have to ask someone like Dr. Alex. My own thought is that moon landing. That if the moon landing was fake, they'd have put stars. They'd have put stars in the background. The lack of stars due to the camera having to adjust for the surface says to me it happened. That's also, that is another thing. Is that why would they not have stars in the background, Darren? Just because they couldn't afford them? Just warning. On my channel, I have a video called Apollo versus Patterson Gimlin. You should start there if you can't handle a British documentary about the. It's not that I can't handle it. I'm not interested, Darren. Here's the thing. It's not that important to me, right? Personally, I accept that it happened. It's not. It doesn't affect me personally in that if the moon landing didn't happen, does that hurt me in any way, shape, or form? No. But. I understand some people are obsessed with the idea. To me, it's just I find moon landing conspiracy theorists to be kind of interesting in that I don't understand why they're so convinced. They're absolutely convinced, and they are absolutely obsessive about it. Like this is the most important thing ever. Years ago, Bavarian Public Television used to show pure NASA footage for hours, loop every night, e.g. the moon rover driving into Uriah's heaps, easy living, best television ever. Joseph says, the first stage land on the drone ship and the feed always cuts out due to atmospheric disruptions from the flames, heat, and stuff. Tried explaining physics to dumbos. I don't know. Yeah, if that's the case, I don't know. But Joseph, maybe that's the case. That could be why cut out, but I remember that they did catch it on film the first time, or at least the first test that I saw. You do realize those suits those guys are wearing are not space suits, right? They're not even G-force suits. They're not connected to anything. Okay. What are they then? If they're not space suits. First of all, G-force suits. There's no such thing. We don't have. I mean, I suppose you could have a gelatin type suit that would help cushion you from massive G-force, but there's nothing there's no such thing as inertial dampeners. But I don't know why you would say they're not space suits just because they're not connected to anything. Maybe they have a little bit of a and I don't know what you're talking about, the suits on this current mission, or are you talking about the suits from Apollo? Because don't they have their own independent oxygen supply? I mean, I'm not an expert, but I would assume that they had their own independent oxygen supply. According to your interpretation of the Bible, which should be believed, the earth is round. According to your interpretation of the Bible, which should be believed, the earth is round or the earth is flat? Well, first of all, the interpretation of the Bible is not a science textbook at all. And so the Bible doesn't specify the shape of the earth. Now, some people argue that it does because of lines like the four corners of the earth. However, to this day, people use that as an expression of speech to say that they've been everywhere. I've been to the four corners of the earth, right? That's an old adage. But there's also lines in the Bible about how God hung the earth in place in the universe, the circle of the earth, stuff like that is also in the Bible. So you can make the case for either one if you really, really want to stretch it and take various verses out of context. To me, the Bible doesn't make a strong statement about the shape of the earth. The Van Allen belt was created in order to provide an explanation for why we haven't gone back to the moon. Said belt was not a problem in 1969. Okay. I don't know anything about the Van Allen belt, so sorry, I'm not going to argue about something I don't know. The moon landing hoax does hurt you. It hurts you spiritually, if anything else. Why? I believe in God, regardless of if we landed on the moon or not. And in fact, our landing on the moon has zero bearing on whether or not I believe in God. So it doesn't hurt me spiritually. Unless you want to argue that if you believe that the earth is round as opposed to flat, then you're going to hell. But I don't think you would make that case. I'm going to head out, but before I do, I have to mention the band Imagine Dragons did a fun video called I'm on Top of the World, where they throw almost every moon conspiracy into it. I did like Imagine Dragons. Yosef says, leaving the stream, I'm triggered by stupidity. Oh, Yosef. Have a good one, my friend. Darren says, those suits do look good and stylish. I'll give them that. But they're flight suits, not space suits. Well, they're flying. And maybe the idea is that they're not planning on going out into space. I mean, they're obviously not going out on, to spacewalk. So, the Bible is a flat earth book from cover to cover. Darren? Whatever. I don't think the Bible makes it particularly... No, I don't remember any verse of the Bible that says, hey, guess what? You walk to the edge of the earth, you fall off. You know, I don't remember any verse in the Bible. I mean, you can argue about the firmament, but even that is an the problem is that what you have to do is you have to define what the firmament is in order to make your case. You have to change or add definitions to various terms that we don't have clear definitions of in order to make your case. And I can't stand it when people do that for any political cause or anything like that, because what people will do is they'll say, you see, this word in the Bible that we don't have an interpretation for, what it really means is this, in order to make some case or another. Some people thought you could see strings in the moon landing video. Yeah, well, I haven't. The Bible says the moon is a light, not an object you can be landed on. They're eroding the book of Genesis, a foundation for our scripture. That's why it hurts you spiritually. Okay. So you think that the moon is literally a light bulb? Or a lantern? Or do you think it is a physical object? Because here's the thing, Darren. You don't have to have a telescope to see that the moon is a physical object. Right? And I don't understand why. So saying that the moon is not a light, if it was a light, then the whole thing would be glowing, wouldn't it? I mean, there would be no phases of the moon. There would be definitely no such thing as an eclipse of the moon if the whole thing was a light. See what I'm saying? JP says, good morning. How you doing? Dan says, in sci-fi, they do that when you go through the atmosphere, you lose contact, and then when you're through, you regain contact. True, but I don't know how much of that is accurate or not. And Darren says, walk off the edge. Okay, Steve Shives. Wow, Darren, you're just getting mean today. You don't see me calling you names just because I disagree with you. But if you want to call me Steve Shives, that's kind of mean. So this just in, the flat forehead Neanderthals didn't die off. They became a genetic anomaly that has shown up again since 2000. Stop. Don't call Darren a Neanderthal. I love Darren. He's a great guy. The moon emits its own light. It also doesn't illuminate the way a sphere would if it was being shined upon by another light. Okay, so if the moon emits light, why is it that the moon's light isn't always emitting? And when you say it does, here's the problem. I mean, Darren, I'm not an expert. I'm not an astronomer, but I have, tinkered with home telescopes, and you can see shadows on the moon. And if the moon is emitting light directly, you shouldn't see any shadows because the whole thing will be glowing. And the shadows are at angles to where the light source is definitely not the surface of the moon itself. So, I mean, even with my lay understanding of physics and everything, I don't buy that. The moon looks like it is a physical object that has a bright light being shined upon it. It doesn't look like a light-emitting source. They did take off the suits, so the SpaceX capsule is a pressurized cabin. Well, there you go. You're doing your best Steve Shives impression today. Darren, please stop calling me Steve Shives. I know you're trying to trigger me, but, you know, that's just mean. Seriously, it's mean. All right? I'm not calling you any names. I'm just disagreeing with you. I know you're feeling feisty about this, and I know you care about it passionately. But it's going to... I'm sorry. Saying the moon is a light-emitting diode of some kind in space... Well, actually, that there isn't even space, so I don't know how it's up there. But but suggesting that the moon is a light source as opposed to a light reflector is simply... basically based on the physical, tangible evidence. I don't see it. Now, maybe it is. Maybe there's some wonderful property of the moon that I don't understand. But I'm also not, like, trying to hang my hat on it and die on that field, all right? It's not that important to me. The light the moon emits has very different properties than sunlight. For example, moonlight is cold. It usually lowers the temperature of whatever it shines on. Really? I've never heard that. Honestly, I've never tried to measure the coldness of light from the moon, which doesn't seem to make sense unless, I mean, maybe you're right. Maybe all physics is just wrong. But my understanding is that, you know, cold isn't actually a property. Cold is simply the absence of heat. But I don't know. I'm not a physicist. And let's see. Darren says, you're merely dismissing the things I'm saying on a philosophical grounds, just like mainstream science. No, I'm dismissing, like, the moonlight thing. I already told you why I dismiss it. Has nothing to do with philosophy. It has to do with the fact that I have looked at the moon through a telescope. Right? And if you look at the moon through a telescope, you can see shadows on the moon. Right? You don't need to have a super powerful telescope to see shadows on the moon. And you can actually see the angle at which the shadows are on the moon. And clearly the light source is off to the side, casting a shadow in that direction. If the moon itself was radiating light, then there should be no shadows on the surface of the moon. That's, I think, a fairly intuitive thing. If, you know, just like you don't see, like, I have a light panel right here that's shining on me, right? On that light panel, one thing you don't see, shadows. Because it's a light emitting panel. However, on a physical object, you can see shadows. That's my basis for argumentation. Not simply the philosophy of the idea that of a spherical Earth and the existence of space, but just basic observation. Cold moonlight is observable, testable, and repeatable. The moon's shadows are not what you think they are. Well, they appear to be shadows. And the problem is that, and so I'm sure you have a suggestion as to what they are. But the problem is that, and this is the genuine problem with what you're about to say, Darren. And I would challenge you, if you want to, we'll hang our hat on the shadow thing for a second. If you want to suggest that what I'm seeing is shadows on the moon based on my direct observations through a telescope, then what are they that you can demonstrate that makes less assumptions than it being shadows? Because the problem is, no matter what you say, you're going to have to invent something arbitrarily that fits the description that's going to make more assumptions than just shadows. That's the big problem you're going to run into. And don't forget the Sting don't forget Sting sings about walking on the moon. That's true, but that's not an argument. Darth Ball says, when the moon hits your eye like a big pizza pie, it's amore. That is true. Why bother debating flat earthers? Let them remain wallowing in his ignorance. Well, first of all, Darren is a friend. All right, so, and I know he likes to fight about it every now and then, and that's cool. I don't mind. To derail the conversation, did you manage to look at the door yet? No. Sorry. The moon is also occasionally transparent. Why? That's like, I mean, now that's the problem, Darren. Is that the more you say that is and first of all, I would also have to call BS on that. Because if you're saying that, like, where the phases of the moon is like, the phases of the moon are a transparency of the moon, right? That's where the moon is transparent, and so that's why it phases out, right? Here's the problem. Again, observing the moon through a telescope, you can't see stars through the dark portion of the moon. If the moon was transparent when it wasn't shining, then I would see stars through it. And so, again, that kind of falls flat. And that, it's no pun intended there. But and in fact, if you look carefully on, you know, when you're like, just have a sliver of the moon, you can still see the full outline of the moon. So that becomes a problem, is that show me an instance where you can see through the moon, and I will accept that it is occasionally transparent. But I've never seen that. I know you might say, well, you can't see something that's transparent, but you should be able to see evidence of it, because you would see the part that is not transparent, and then you would see basically what would appear to be a missing chunk of the moon where it's transparent. Resolution says, stop engaging. Taryn is in full fedora tipping mode. There are so many arguments that flat earthers use, might as well change the subject. One conspiracy theory is that when alien, and that's the thing, but you know, Darren's the one talking, you guys aren't. So there are so many arguments. I already read that. One conspiracy theory is that when the alien ship that was on the other side of the moon, some people believe that they told astronauts to get off the moon, and that's why we don't go back. Calling you Steve Shives was probably a touch much. Sorry about that. That's all right, Darren. But as long as you recognize that was just mean. There's footage of the moon where it appears transparent. You can see stars through the dark portion. But the problem is, okay, if you have some, this is the problem with that. So if you find some random piece of footage that shows, ooh, look, it's transparent, somebody could just as easily argue that that's faked or that's a flaw in the lens of the camera. However, when I look at the moon through a telescope, I can see that it is not transparent. And so I would take what I see with my own eyes above what I see in video, especially knowing as much as I do about video editing that you can, you know, create almost any image you want. So I would take what I can see with my own eyes above what I can see created in a video designed to convince me of something. Did you ever see that? Did you ever like that show Beyond Belief, Fact or Fiction, starring Jonathan Frakes? Never watched it. Honestly, not a big fan of Jonathan Frakes outside of number one. And then, Andrea said transparent photos were taken with a telescope. It's observable, testable, repeatable. Yeah, every time, without exception, that I've looked at the moon through a telescope and it wasn't a full moon, I have not been able to see through it. And that's observable, testable, and repeatable as well. And so that's the problem, is that you can say it's observable, testable, repeatable, but the problem is that, yeah, and when you observe, test, and repeat, you find that you can't see through the moon. I've done it. That's the problem, Darren. You're arguing with me about trying to suggest that here I have a picture that shows you can see through the moon. I've actually looked at the moon and saw that you couldn't see through the moon. That's your problem right there. And that is every bit as much observable as what you're suggesting. And in fact, Darren, I would argue that, let's look at it. If I don't have a telescope right now, but if I did have a telescope, I would say, let's look at the moon tonight and see, right? But unfortunately, I don't have a telescope anymore. And I'm not going to spring money for one because I don't have money to spring for one. We all like Darren. We just don't want to hurt his feelings, and we don't want to argue with him on another's channel. That's why we aren't engaging him here. That's all right, Indy. Actually, I need to wrap it up anyway because I gotta work in like less than 20 minutes. So it was fun, Darren. I do enjoy it, and so there you go. And Val, if you have a telescope, yes. So if you look at, I don't know what the phase of the moon is right now, but it obviously would not a full moon. But if you had any kind of partial moon, you should be able to see through the part of the moon that's not illuminated. Apparently, that's the argument. That's what we need to test and observe. That's your mission. All right, guys. So take care. Have a good one. And yeah, I gotta go to work now.
Making your way with the nerds today takes everything you've got. Taking a break from hating JJ sure would help a lot. Wouldn't you like to just get laid? Sometimes you wanna go where all the Trekkies know your name, and they're always glad you came. You wanna be in a galaxy where Star Trek isn't lame. You wanna go where everybody knows your name. Turds of a feather flock together, that's what we believe. We know a place that's got you covered, a place to get relief. Wouldn't you like to say me poo? Sometimes you wanna go where Turnistannies know your name, and old Kurogans are to blame. You wanna be where you can see Kuroga go up in flames. You wanna go where everybody knows your name.
You son of a bitch, anti-tracker!